Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello.
Hello. Hola.
Bonjour.
I haven't done my Spanish on Duolingo today, so I have to remember to do it.
Did you break your... Are you
No,
still going?
I've got until tonight at like midnight.
Oh, good.
You know what, though? When I was at StokerCon, one of the days, I could not. I didn't get upstairs until after midnight. But apparently at some point I had earned a freeze. So it actually froze that day for me so I wouldn't lose my streak.
Nice.
That's not going to happen again. Or at least I don't know how many freezes it'll give me.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention. I'm always in such a hurry to do the lessons that I push the okay on whatever they tell me. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I only read that one saying I'd earned a streak freeze because I was like, oh God, I lost it after all that work. And then I was like, oh.
You've sold your soul to Duolingo.
I'm at like 112 days. I think today will be 113.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But now the Spanish is leaking in everywhere. And like, if I say something and have that time, now it's like my new loop, my perseveration, my whatever, that I'll say something and then I'll say it in Spanish in my head.
That's good though.
Yeah, sure. If you're not on a Spanish loop in your head trying to, well, I don't know that word, then I get frustrated. I don't know how to say that, but I can say everything else in this sentence. How would I work my way around this when I'm in Mexico in a few months? Since we're going to Playa del Carmen. I'm not saying
nice. When. You better tell me when.
Well, I will. But I'm not saying it on here. I don't tell people when I'm out of state.
No.
But
that would not do. That would not be wise for people who have a true crime podcast.
Right?
Hey, I'm going to be out of town.
By the way, on June 7th.
And my house is going to be empty.
Well, my kids will be here. We're not taking them.
Good.
But yeah, so I'm like, all right, what situation am I going to run into? Because I need to make sure I know how to say the things. But, you know, everything you read is like, if you even show that you've made an effort to learn the language, people will automatically be nicer to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, I've made an effort to be able to speak for us.
Yes.
And I think we'll be okay because all we want to do is spend our time at the beach and then go to restaurants. As long as I know how to ask for shit at the restaurant and get a taxi, the type of taxi we need, not the dangerous type of taxi. Because apparently where we're going is like 3 hours from the airport or something like that. So you got to find your way. And they're like, caution. And I'm like, fuck. We were going to go the first week of a month. But then I realized for my job, like that's the busiest time for me. Because we have like 3 things that the deadline is on the 5th. And I'm like, fine. Or the week after. I don't know yet. We haven't booked anything. We're looking at like, do we want to go in June? No. Do we want to go in October? How about November? How about May? How about...
Yep. Oh my God.
Everything we look at, there's so many things.
Plane fares went up so much.
Did they?
Because we went to Florida in April, and then I was last week. Okay, by the time this comes out, it'll be roughly a month ago. But like a month after we traveled to Florida, I was looking at fares, and they have doubled.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? I mean, I know why it happened, but like, when is it going to come back down?
When's anything going to come back down?
Yes, that's a good question. Did I tell you I went to IKEA a few weeks ago? No. I went to IKEA. I went with my friend Amy and with Nikki. Nikki took us. Well, I drove, but Nikki was like, yes, I will take you and shepherd you through IKEA so you don't get lost. We would have been very happy lost in IKEA, but so we were walking around and being our normal loud selves. So I see this lamp and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so pretty. It's this hanging lamp. And Nikki goes, she said the most MB thing I've ever heard her say. She goes, oh, that would be a bitch to dust. And I looked at her and I laughed and I said, I don't dust. So I said, we're both right. It's very pretty. It would be a bitch to dust and it would always look like shit after the first 2 months because I would not dust it.
Right? I can see why. The light is very high, so it is not dusted. No.
I've never seen the dust. I can't see it. Too far away. There's no dust. You're hallucinating.
Great. Exactly what I wanted to hear.
There's no dust there.
I dust down here because I'm super allergic. So I do try to dust weekly, but I hate dusting.
When I was getting ready to leave for the scrapbooking retreat, I cleaned my bathroom, I swept, I mopped downstairs, and she was like, do you have a fever? No, I hate coming home to a dirty house.
Same. I know, I always, before I go to a conference, I normally clean and everything first, because I'm like, no matter what you people do when I'm gone, it's still going to be cleaner than before I cleaned it. And then these last couple, I just didn't have time. Like, there was too much other stuff to prep or whatever. So.
Yeah. And I was so proud of myself that I had all this stuff done and had time to have a cup of tea before I left, forgetting that there was a huge pile of laundry I dumped on the bed and left it there.
He's just like, so am I supposed to sleep in this? Or
I did text him. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. I'm so sorry. And he goes, well, Evie was a little upset about the clothes on her side of the bed. And I was like, why? They weren't on my pillow. And I know damn well that's where she was sleeping.
She's fine.
Life with a dog.
With a dog.
A dog.
I had a Doberman, so she did not sleep on my pillow. She's too big. But she never got up on the bed. But she did think she was a lap dog. And I would do this little thing because I was down in the basement and it was cold. Yes. And so I had a little space heater. And I would have this little lamp that I could set up. And then a sleeping bag and my pillows. And I would just get down on the floor and sleep in the sleeping bag next to the heater. Because I was that cold. And then she, of course, was like, yes.
Yeah.
And then she would sleep on the sleeping bag.
So one of the women I know, she has a grand dog, and it was at her house after the last big snowstorm, and her husband went outside, and the dog was in the tree. Now this is a half Siberian Husky, half pit, so we're not talking. It was a little whiffly thing that just ran up it's a big ass dog, and I said, did he? Her husband was mad because he had to get the dog, this big ass dog out of the tree. And I'm like, did he take pictures? And she's like, no. And I was like, would you ask him next time this happens, would he please take pictures? Because I want to see this big ass dog in the tree. And she's like, when there's a serious situation, you don't take pictures first. And Amy and I look at each other. Yeah, you do. If nobody's
depends on if they're going to die. Was the dog going to die? No, take a picture.
The dog was happy. So it had chased a squirrel, and it got so far up off the ground that the squirrel had circled around. It was now beneath the dog.
Right, going, ha ha ha, you dumbass. Yeah, right. Yeah, we have our biggest cat, the one that's part Abyssinian. She loves to go up trees, and I'm surprised we haven't had to we wouldn't call the fire department. We have a lot of ladders, but. We have a lot of ladders.
My thought is when a cat runs up a tree, the cat can get itself down.
She always does.
Right?
But I'm like, quit running up that. She loves to run up a tree. And she does. She zooms up the trunk. It's not even going up branches. She just zooms up the trunk. And I'm like, that's amazing.
I have to assume, I don't know how the dog got up the tree, but I'm like, seriously, could you put a Ring doorbell, a motion sensor camera back there?
Can you throw a fake squirrel in the tree and see if he does it again? Catch it on film?
Could Dan film it? Not just take a picture. Could he film it? And then could you forward it to all of us here? Because we're really interested in this now. We're all invested in how the dog got in the tree.
All right, you want to start?
I will begin. So I'm going to talk about the story of Brookey Lee West. And I don't even know how yes, I do know how this came across my radar. So this is it's like the story you had last week, that there's so many facets to it.
Yeah.
I mean, this was so long. I had to start cutting parts. And there's shit I'm just going to kind of refer to.
That's the problem, though, is I cut stuff out, and then I end up saying stuff about the stuff I cut out anyway, and I'm like, so what took up more time?
Yes, because I was like, this is way too long. My sources on this, of course, Wikipedia. There was an article from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, caselaw.findlaw.com, but my biggest source was a book called Witch, the bone-chilling true story of U.S. murderer Brookey Lee West, and it's by Glenn Puitt, P-U-I-T. I highly recommend this book. If you want to know more about this case, he has so much detail that it's too much to go into. There are some standout things that happened in this case that will impact other cases. But it's just her story, even without the murder.
Right.
Her life is so fucked up. It
right? So it's like it's mayhem, really.
It is so much mayhem, but then there is a murder.
Yeah.
There's one, possibly three, but at least one. So it was really hard to know where to start. I think the book did a good job, but I'm not going to do... I'm not just regurgitating the book. Brookey Lee West was convicted of murdering her mother. She's suspected of murdering her brother and one of her husbands and attempting to kill her stepmother. So the case has been sensationalized from one end to the other, and it just gets weirder the deeper you dig. So you kind of have to start with her parents. Because I can't imagine that these two human beings were allowed to have children. Not that there's anything stopping people from having children, but okay. So her mother, Christine Sands, was the youngest of 6 children born in Texas in 1932. Her brother was interviewed for this book, and he's like, we had a normal upbringing. There wasn't a lot of emphasis on education, on staying in school, but he's like, we played with the neighborhood kids. She dropped out of school at the age of 13, and another one of her brothers did as well. At the age 16, she married what was basically a local thug who moved her to Houston. So there, her husband started abusing her, and he also put her on the street as a prostitute. So she called home and got her father and brother to come get her, took her back home. She got a divorce.
Okay, good.
So she's like 17 and divorced and has been a prostitute. That just... I can't even imagine. So Brookey's father, his name was Leroy Smith. And when he was 5 years old, living in Tennessee with his family, his father killed his mother, cutting her head off with a machete.
Oh.
So, obviously, Dad went to prison. Leroy was left with his 3 older sisters, who put him on a bus with a note on his jacket explaining that he was an orphan. He was adopted by a childless couple who lived in Arkansas and took him to Arkansas from somewhere in Tennessee. It didn't say where. I'm like, Tennessee is very nonspecific. And apparently it was a very hard life. There was a lot of moving around. There was a lot of poverty. At 16, he lied about his age and joined the army. And he became an absolute nut for guns. Apparently he was someone who... He owned a lot of them, and he took very good care of them, and he was still a gun nut. He was also hugely racist about fucking everybody and everything. So they met at a roller rink, and it was immediately one of those relationships where I was trying to describe this story to Joe, and I said, the best way to describe it, the gist I'm getting from this is that they were either fighting or fucking. Christine said she was pregnant, so they got married. He was very unhappy. He did not want to marry her, and he was really upset when he figured out she was lying. She just wanted to get married and get out of the house. Okay. When he got out of the army a year later, he went to work for the El Paso County Police Department and apparently started sampling all the wares from the drug busts. He was just not... He was the epitome of the crooked cop.
Yeah.
And he wasn't very high up in the chain either. So Christine kept up. And their house was full of drugs. He was just bringing home all kinds of stuff and doing it. And she was like, well, I got nothing better to do than smoke cigarettes and drink liquor, and I'll take the drugs too. At this point in time, she started claiming to be Native American, which was there's no basis in anything. She just did. Leroy was sleeping around. Christine started sleeping around. In 1952, she got pregnant for real this time, and Brookey came along. In 1956, it happened again, and her brother Travis was born. Travis was apparently a very challenging child. Brookey was apparently a fairly easy baby, but Travis, I will summarize it by saying he was a high-energy baby and a biter with a speech impediment.
Great.
In the mid-50s, Leroy was fired from the police department, and it's not really clear if it was a drug problem. There's some hint that he may have borrowed quotation marks, money that from the police department.
If he was taking all that drugs, then why would he have a problem taking money?
So, but apparently he may have borrowed money and then not been able to pay it back. They moved from Texas to Bakersfield, California. And he and Christine just kept cheating on each other. I can't imagine growing up in this household. At one point, and you would not even believe how much I am summarizing at this point. At one point, Christine shot her married lover. He survived. And was arrested, tried, and convicted of assault with the intent to commit murder and sentenced to 14 years in prison. So when this happens, after she's sent to jail, two things happen. Leroy insists that Brookey tell her little brother that their mother is dead.
Okay.
Yeah. Instead of him dealing with it in any way, shape, or form. So in 1962, Leroy, after she's been sent to jail, after his son is now devastated, his mother's dead, he dropped the kids off at the Baptist Sunnycrest Home for Youths.
Oh.
An orphanage. However, it was a small concern. It only housed about 20 children, and the people who owned it were really good people. I know you're looking shocked, and it is shocking because the stereotype is very much goes the other way.
Mm.
But Brookey and Travis both thrived in this setting because they had attention. They had clean clothes. They had food. They got to go to school regularly. Brookey especially had a very big problem with school because people knew her mother was in jail for murder or for attempted murder. So she was always having problems. So Christine has her first parole hearing. She has served 2 years and she gets released. Nobody can really say why. It wasn't like she was a model prisoner, although they did say she fit into prison. Like, she was one of the gang. People feared her and respected her, and she got the cushy jobs and had influence, and she gets released after just 2 years. Leroy and Christine yoink the kids out of the only stability they've had, and they move to San Jose.
Great.
So at the age of 9, Travis starts helping himself to the bounty of drugs in the house. So you've got a 9-year-old kid who's on the highway to becoming a drug addict.
Yeah.
Leroy, around this time, becomes obsessed with spells and witchcraft and black magic. He calls himself a warlock. He goes to secret meetings. He wears a black robe. He writes in, I want to say Enochian, and I know that's not the right language, but there's an alphabet, the witch's alphabet, and he writes curses.
Like isn't it? It's like one of the satanic ones or something.
I don't know. I only know it from Supernatural, which is probably not, a scholarly based TV show. When Brookey and Travis were in high school, Christine and Leroy finally divorced. Travis is completely hooked on drugs. He's well known to the local police for stealing to support his habit. He's just a lost boy.
Yeah.
He is totally... But at this point, after they got divorced, Christine swore off alcohol, started going to AA, and found God in a very big way. She was also finally diagnosed as mentally ill, as a sociopath with psychopathic tendencies.
Yikes.
Yeah. I mean, she attacked her. At some point, they had a whole big, God, I don't even think I couldn't even include this. Brookey and her mother had this whole shoplifting scam going on.
Yeah.
And so they had both been encountering the criminal justice system. So at some point, somebody looked at her mother and went, this bitch is nuts, and had her, what's the word I want? Not tested, but evaluated.
Yeah.
And that's when then they sent her to somebody else. They're like, yep, she's mentally ill. So Brookey is working 2 jobs to support her mother. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the tangled web of familial relationships, but I have to ask myself, it just seems like she would have run away But she didn't. She supported her mother. This woman who is, and when she got pregnant, for real, her parents were just like terrible to her.
Well, first of all, if you're a sociopath with psychopathic tendencies, you don't give a shit about anybody else.
That's true.
You're not equipped to care about anybody else.
So Brookey met and fell for a man named Ray at church. And they had a long weekend in Vegas in 73. And when they get home, Brookey turns up pregnant. So she would have been just like 21 at this time. He didn't want her. He didn't want the kid. And that's when her parents turned on her. They're just, both of them, they're calling her a whore and a tramp and all kinds of things. So still supporting her mother and being a single parent herself, when the child was 4, Brookey sent her daughter to a boarding school in Arizona. And I think it was because she was remembering when she was in the orphanage and what a positive thing that was for her. After years go by of only occasional visits, in 1984, Brookey wanted to let the couple at the boarding school adopt her daughter. They all wanted that.
Okay.
I mean, Brookey wanted that. Her daughter wanted that. The couple wanted that. The man, who wanted nothing to do with them, fought back, and he said he wanted custody. However, in January of 1985, a man in black, dressed head to toe in black, not a FBI agent or CIA, whoever the men in black are now, a man dressed all in black showed up on the doorstep of Ray's 86-year-old grandmother and shot her point blank. He asked for Ray. She said he's not here, and he pulled out a gun and shot her. Shot her in the chest and fled. She survived, but no clues were ever found for the gunman's identity. He just shot her and ran. There was no bullet casing. There were no fingerprints. There were no witnesses. And the 86-year-old woman, obviously she saw who shot her, but her story changed. She was 86. 86 and shot in the fucking chest.
Yeah.
So a month later, Ray received a letter with no return address containing a hand-drawn pentagram and satanic chants that predicted the death of his entire family. So he dropped the custody suit. He let his daughter be adopted. That case is still open. The case of the grandmother shooting was never solved, never resolved. Again, summarizing hugely, Brookey had 2 marriages that ignited and burned out quickly, both with much older men. She got a job, and people are like, this is just so fucked up. She got a job with National Advanced Systems, which was a huge break for her. She was hired as a security guard. Initially, that's where she met the second husband. She's hired as a security guard, got promoted to a secretary, and then she started studying computers. She's studying computers on her own time. She got books from the Stanford Library, and she really had a gift for understanding the logic behind computer programming. She became a technical writer in Silicon Valley and was highly regarded for her skills, which is just totally out of the blue. I mean, this woman has no education. She's had such a hard life, but her true gift is writing tech manuals that regular people can understand. She could translate computer logic into simple, plain English. So she's in demand as a contractor, and finally she's making like $65 to $100 an hour. And she's finally relieving some of the financial strain in her life. She's still supporting her mother. And they're living together, they're not living together, they're living together, they're not living together. But at this point in time, they start visiting the Native American Indian Center in San Jose. Okay. Because they both are now claiming to be Native Americans. So they started attending the AA meetings there, which are supposed to be it's designed to be group for Native Americans. There is a recovery house like next door or very close by, which is where the recovery house is for men, and it's for men who've hit bottom, hit absolute bottom. And part of the process, part of the stipulation for living in this house is they have to attend AA meetings. And this is where they go at this center. So these 2 women showed up. So Brookey and her mom show up, and Brookey is usually in heavy makeup and dressed like she's going clubbing. I mean, she's got on low-cut red shirts and bright red nails and high heels and the whole 9 yards. So nobody there believed them when they said they were part Native American. They were all like, the fuck you are. But they couldn't make them leave. You know what I'm saying. So Brookey had an affair with one of the men who was like working in the kitchen. And she just walked back and like opened her shirt and was like, do you like what you see? And he was like, in fact, I do.
I do enjoy a boob.
Who doesn't like a boob? So they dated for a while. And he said and he was like, she was just wild in bed. It was great. They were sitting in her car and she pulled out a gun because apparently she shared her father's love of guns. But she pulled out a gun and said, if you ever cheat on me, I'll kill you. He was like, thank you. I think we're done now.
Yeah.
So
we're not even in a relationship. We're straight up just screwing.
We're
I don't
buddies,
know you.
And I don't even know that we're buddies. Yeah. After that, she met a man named Howard Simon St. John. And he had a lot of friends at this center. And even the people who loved him dearly said he looked like hell. He was extremely overweight. He was unkempt. He had rotting teeth. And she just was like, that's the man for me. So she fixed him up, bought him clothes, bought him a car. She's living in this nice neighborhood, like where we live, nice residential neighborhood. And here's the thing, when she and her mom move into, Brookey buys a house, she and her mom move in. The mom's alone during the day while Brookey's working. So the mom goes out and meets all the neighbors. The neighbors love the mom at first because she comes in, she's this little old lady, somebody's grandmother from Texas. And she's just telling all these cute, funny stories. And she's talking about Jesus and how she loves her daughter. And then all of a sudden, she apparently gets comfortable enough. And she's like, well, I was on death row because I tried to kill my married lover. And she got so weird. People were like, we can't let this woman in our house anymore. So this is the neighborhood. And people just thought Brookey was a little odd. She and Howard get married. And she moves him into the house, which is a huge mistake because fucking nobody gets along with their mother, ever. Anybody. Not even Brookey. But she moves this guy in and it's like hate at first sight. They can't stand each other. Everybody's fighting constantly. So Brookey eventually, now there's a controversy here. She either moved her mother out or she drove her mother to a parking lot and kicked her out.
I like that version.
Yeah. But Brookey and Howard had some crazy loud fights. Because again, he's an alcoholic. He's trying not to be, but he can't win the fight. No, I'm not saying he wasn't able to. He's trying and he's losing. That's just what his story is. So they get in this big fight and she shoots him in the neck. Tears a big chunk out of his neck. So he just rushed to the hospital. He has surgery. He recovers. She's arrested for felony assault. Her own father wouldn't get her out of jail. He says she needs a few days in jail to cool off. Then a few days later, she's released on her own recognizance. Her dad picks her up and brings her home. A few weeks later, Howard moves back in. Nobody can believe that. Why would you move in with somebody who fucking shot you? Yeah.
For reasons that I don't understand.
Before, I have to jump back a little bit. Before Brookey shot Howard, she had a Jaguar. I think it was a Jaguar that went up in flames. And so she made an insurance claim. It's a brand new car. After Howard got out of surgery, but before he got out of the hospital, he called the insurance company and said, yeah, I torched that car. She paid me to torch that car. It wasn't stolen.
Yeah, don't turn on or shoot the people that you get to do your shit for you.
So, however, a few days after he moved back in with Brookey, Howard's dead body was found in the Lower Coffee Camp recreational area in Sequoia National Forest. His pants were halfway down and a plastic bag was over his face. He had been shot in the back with a .38 caliber handgun somewhere, they don't know where, and dumped at this site. And although a lot of circumstantial evidence pointed to Brookey, the case is still open. Nobody was ever charged. They couldn't make any charges stick. She hasn't been tried for it. So it's still open.
His pants
Unsolved.
were halfway down. I feel like
that set. His pants were down, way down, and his underwear was down his legs.
Yeah, because he thought he was going to get some. And
a plastic bag
him
over his face.
Yeah, and then shot in the back, though. That's interesting.
Yeah. There's also suspicion that she tried to kill her stepmother in 1996. Her father had been diagnosed with brain cancer. So here's the thing. Again, there's so many side stories I can't even go into. Her stepmother had a totally different view of this man that she married, Brookey's father, than anybody else did, because he was just very caring for her. And she was like very mild-mannered and very quiet, and he really liked that after being married to the loud woman who shot her married lover. She felt like she never really saw that side of him until he got sick. And then she tried to say it was the illness that caused him to act this way, but he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and his second wife is at he had an apartment wherever it was he was getting treatment. So he didn't have to travel back and forth to home. So she goes to the apartment because she's looking for some paperwork because she's trying to pay bills. Oh, and by the way, when she starts investigating so she can pay the bills, she finds out he's been taking out credit cards in her name. And there's over $200,000 in debt because he's gotten cash advances and just never bothered to mention it. Forged her name. So she's looking for a title to a car, and Brookey tells her, oh, it's at Dad's apartment. He took a bunch of paperwork with him. So she goes to the apartment with Brookey, and Brookey goes, I'm pretty sure I saw him put a box of paperwork under the bed. So the woman gets down on her hands and knees, and she's got her head under the bed. She's trying to find this box of paperwork, and she hears this snap and crack behind her, and she turns around, and Brookey has tried to tase her, like with a cattle prod, with a really super powerful cattle prod, and she missed and hit the bed. That's what the woman heard. And the woman gets up and screams, is just like running for bloody hell, calls the cops, runs out of the house. Brookey runs out after her, jumps in her car, and leaves. The cops come, and Leroy refuses to corroborate his wife's story and refuses to implicate his daughter. And he died shortly thereafter. In all of this, remember we talked about her brother earlier, Travis. Travis disappears. Travis has become homeless, and periodically someone in the family would track him down, most often his dad. And the last time, Travis was just like, stop coming here. It hurts me when you come here. I have my friends. I am happy here. I'm happy living like this. You need to just forget about me. You need to leave me alone. And he just disappeared because a couple of times they tried to find him after that and could not. In January or February of 1998, Brookey, who's now living in an apartment with her mom, told her mother's friends, and again, same thing, her mom has made friends with all these little old ladies, told the friends that her mother had gone to live with her brother and his girlfriend, the same brother that nobody's been able to find for years. And it later comes to light that Brookey had made arrangements for her brother's Social Security checks to go into an account that she had access to. Yeah. Brookey starts telling people that Christine has moved. She's gone to live with my brother and his wife, or his girlfriend. And people are like, your brother, the drug addict, that you don't know where he is? So some of Christine's friends don't believe her. And they're seeing like homeless people in the neighborhood have her possessions, or some of them are in the dumpster. Some of them are still in the house. And they're things that were very valuable to her and very special to her. And her friends are like, one of her friends went to the extent of writing all of it down and called the police. And whoever she talked to said, you need to come in and talk to a detective. And she got there, and whoever she was supposed to speak with wasn't available, or they're like, he's not here today. And she left and never went back. February 5th, 2001. So remember, we're jumping from 98 to 2001. There's a storage facility in Las Vegas, because they're living in Las Vegas now. There's a really, 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 really bad smell at the storage facility. Mm-hmm. So the guys who work there basically sniffed it out. They went up and down the halls and found out which unit it was coming out of, and they called the police. So here's the thing. When the police first got there, and I'm telling you, the book does a marvelous job with this because it goes into some of the police officers and their backgrounds. They didn't initially jump to the conclusion that there was a dead body involved because they'd been called to another storage facility just like a couple of weeks earlier. There was a very similar smell. I actually used the word stench. It was a result of medical waste from an insurance scam. That was as specific as that got. I don't want to know anymore. So they thought, storage facility, same smell. It could be the exact same thing. We found another branch of this. So what they find, they get into the storage unit, and it's full of boxed and wrapped shoes. So it's like boxes of shoes that are wrapped with a plastic wrap, and a lot of boxes full of books on Satanism and witchcraft. But in the corner, there's a trash can. The trash can is closed. It's sealed with duct tape. It's covered with that green plastic wrap. And then there are garbage bags taped together over that. And it's leaking. So they test the fluid, and it comes back positive for blood. And let me tell you, if you like the oogie details, this is fascinating because they've never dealt with anything like this. Because the body had been in the can for so long. They suspect it had been in there, and they couldn't tell at first. They were like, it could have been in here a few months. It could have been in here a few years. And the whole thing they had to do to move the can to the medical examiner's office. And then they had to, let's just say, get rid of the fluid, but they had to pour it through a strainer.
Yeah.
In case
I recently watched it's funny because I recently watched the thing about a barrel body. There's been a lot of barrel bodies.
Yes. And this one, it was just because it had been preserved. It wasn't like a barrel out in the sun. Mm-hmm. It was anyway. So they had found an ID near the trash can in here, and the bottom jaw of the body was intact enough to get a dental record match. So it was Christine Smith, who was the mother of the storage shed renter, Brookey Lee West. And they had to go through some false leads to track her down because her address was listed and it was a mailbox, drop box. Mm-hmm. It wasn't an actual physical address. And she did have a Nevada driver's license, but it listed the same drop box. So they subpoenaed Nevada Power Company and got an address for her and found her apartment. They got a search warrant. And here's the critical piece right here. They found bank statements from Christine West's bank showing she'd been receiving Social Security deposits since she'd gone missing, and there were withdrawals from that account. Strangely enough, all those ATM withdrawals took place at ATMs without cameras. Not everybody's stupid about cameras. Last week I talked about all those stupid people. This was not one of them.
I don't know how you figure out if it has a camera, because I would just assume, maybe I can't see it, but it might still be like a pinhole thing.
So they found a key that, surprise, surprise, matched the lock on the storage unit. They found duct tape that matched the duct tape that was used on the garbage can. Although, who doesn't have duct tape? I mean, that one is the key to me was a much bigger. If you have any interest in the art of fingerprinting and how that's used to solve crimes, this is a fascinating case because of what they had to go through. They had to test 151 feet of plastic wrap for fingerprints, and they found one perfect print. Oh. It was Brookey's, who, remember all that shoplifting she had been doing? That's why her prints were on record.
Nice.
Also, if you're interested in the oogier side of the ME's job, how they used insect larvae to learn about murder victims. Yeah. This is fascinating. There have been articles written on this case. So, as soon as she was taken into custody, Brookey admitted that she knew her mother was dead. Mm-hmm. She claimed that her mother had died of natural causes, and she had panicked and put the body in the barrel in the storage unit. Okay. As one does. I'm like, I've never been that panicked. I can't even comprehend. Well, Mom had a heart attack. I could have called an ambulance, or I could have put her in
I could just put her in a barrel.
And then seal it up.
Yeah.
One of the things so there's no physical proof, really, that Brookey killed her mother. We were talking about cause of death in the one you were talking about last week. They can say method of death, but not cause. Is it method? Means.
The cause of death, they could say. The means, they could not.
Right.
Yeah.
Here was the other kicker on this one. The body had a plastic bag over its face.
Because it sounds familiar. Were her pants halfway down, or did she not get coaxed by sex?
She was dressed like she had been in bed. She had on like underwear and socks and like a thermal top. So they said that was the police, their first impression was that she'd been dressed like she'd been in bed. But there's this whole thing about flies and maggots and blowflies versus coffin flies. Blowflies can apparently find a dead body from miles away.
Yeah.
But there has to be some kind of exposure. Like the body has to be sitting out for 5 minutes. You know, there were no blowflies, and there were no blowfly larvae. There were no maggots from blowflies on the body. What there were coffin flies. It's a whole thing. I'm like, I will never be able to give it enough explanation to be accurate, because that's not my specialty. But like I said, articles have been written on this because it proved that the body went into the barrel immediately upon death. So while they said, because of the deterioration of the body from sitting in stewing, talk about stewing in your own juices for so long, they could not say the cause of death. But the ME also said, I also can't tell you for sure that she wasn't still alive when she went into the barrel. Yeah. That was kind of damning. So it was the fact that she told everyone that her mother went to live with her brother, who was missing, the fact that she was using her mother's money, and the whole thing about the flies, and the fact that the body went into the barrel so quickly. Yeah. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, which is where she still is, which is, I think, where she needs to be. For a while, she's gotten into artwork. And for a while, she was selling artwork and fingernail clippings online to make a little extra cash. In July of 2012, Brookey disguised her appearance, put on a different set of clothing in an attempt to look like a visitor, and got very close to the prison exit before someone noticed. Before someone went, she's an inmate. So she was detained and is going to face additional... I didn't get a resolution to that. It was said she was going to face additional charges for the escaped attempt, and at minimum would face solitary confinement.
Okay.
So...
For the best, also.
Yeah, probably. So, she was not a good person. She probably killed her mother. She either killed or caused to be killed one of her husbands.
And one wonders where her brother is.
One does wonder where her brother is. At the same time, I can't be unmoved by the way she grew up.
Right.
Not that that gives you leave to kill people. It does not. But I mean, her... And they fought constantly. She and her mother were either best friends or they were just hammering at each other, fighting all the time.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that she has any kind of mental health.
Yeah. I mean, I have cousins who are doing very well who are in similar circumstances. So they haven't killed anybody.
Yeah.
Like 2 of my cousins, their mother took them into a check cashing scam, so they learned that very young. Like preteen, how to do that.
Yep.
Because of course, how do you avoid getting caught? You send children to do your dirty work because people don't want to call them on it and they're going to trust them.
Yep.
And drug use and alcoholism and extreme narcissism from parents and probably some sociopathy and yada, yada, yada. And again, they're all fully functioning human beings who have pulled themselves through it. So you always have to look at the mitigating circumstances. You always have to look at what they did because, everybody grows different from everything.
Yes.
And some people make good of their lives.
I mean, you can accept.
I don't blame her killing her mom, really.
Yeah,
that was one person who deserved it.
I mean, I really think if she had fessed up to it, she could have been like, here's what happened. Yeah. And she could have spun this, and she might have still gone to prison, but it might have been...
less time.
It might have been justifiable homicide, something, at least temporary insanity, something like that. But the fact that she lied to everybody about everything, I can't imagine. It just sounds like it was so toxic. I hate using that word because it's used so...
It's abused right now.
Yeah. But I can't think of a better word to describe what
the words that become cliches are there because they applied to a lot of things. Yeah. So, yeah.
But again, like you said, there's no... I can feel sympathy for the way she grew up, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to kill anybody.
Yeah, you make your choices going forward.
And why she was in her... she got involved with these much older men, and then that didn't work out. And then she would pick up these guys who were worse off than she was. And it's not because she wanted to help them. It was because she wanted to have all the power over them. It just fucked up their lives. You don't get to do that. I don't care how bad your life was. You don't get to make someone else worse.
Yeah.
It's just that. And the more I read that book, I just kept going, I can't. And I tried to sum it up for Joe and go, well, here's what I'm going to be talking about. And I don't always discuss them with him, but I was like, this one is so fucked up. It's hard to get a handle on it. Cause there are just so many, I do recommend the book. I'm debating though, cause I do think calling it witch is a disservice.
Yeah.
But I get it. I totally get it. And he's written a couple other true crime books. I'm like, I might have to read those.
It's never bad to find a new true crime author.
It's true. So, and he's a journalist and blah, blah, blah.
I feel like the best true crime authors were at some point journalists who were reporting on things and learned how to do the research. And
I will say, he got access to her. She talked to him. He interviewed her for hours in prison. She was just like, sure, what do you want to know? Just was completely upfront about a lot of things. I don't think she was upfront about everything, but there were a lot of details that she could have denied or hidden, and she didn't. But I just was like, what the fuck is wrong with people? So, what the fuck is wrong with your story?
Oh, well, I'm doing Dr. Death.
Yay.
So that probably says what's wrong with it. Sources, Oxygen, Wikipedia, a D Magazine article called Dr. Death by Matt Goodman, and Texas Monthly. In 2015, neurosurgeon Christopher Duntsch was arrested for the maiming of patients, an unusual situation in medicine, as attorneys would have to prove he'd intentionally caused harm. However, the actual story and the amount of harm he did caused the charges to pale in comparison. And not only that, but his case would end up setting precedent. The thing is, one of the things in researching this that's dismaying is how hard it is to pin down a doctor who's harming patients.
Did they just make a miniseries out of him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I found out when I was done because I don't like to do stuff that's currently on like streaming platforms. And I was like, well, I'm not doing something different. So I had to do it.
No, I got
So,
it.
hey, if you want to watch it, it's on Peacock. And there's also a docuseries on there. So you have a fictional one with, I don't remember his name. The main guy. Alec Baldwin's in it, but he's not the main guy.
Joshua Jackson.
That's it. Joshua Jackson.
My God, I pulled that right out of my ass.
And then they have the one that's talking to real victims and stuff like that. So with Duntsch, again, now referred to as Dr. Death, it's best to start at the beginning because I feel like it paints a better picture of a man who was handed opportunities, who did work hard. Here's the weird thing, but unfailingly proved to have no talent in the things he did and worked at. So I feel like that sends a message that sometimes innate talent is involved, even if there's real work involved too. Duntsch was born in Montana in 1971, but quickly moved to Memphis, Tennessee. His parents were picture perfect. Like they're with the parent. His father was a physical therapist, an evangelical missionary. His mom was a teacher. He went to an evangelical Christian school and was a football star. Football got him into college, first at Millsaps College, then Colorado State University, because they always come here in some way, shape, or form. However, we'll just rename this podcast and it'll be six degrees of Colorado.
Yes.
Because everybody comes to Colorado at some point. However, no matter how much work he put in, he lacked talent in football. One of the other players who I think went on to be like somebody real, but I decided to leave his name out, was like, I watched him working so hard, like he was really trying. But so he finally returned to Tennessee and he finished college there. I think he might have lost his football scholarship and that was part, but I don't know for sure. He finished off his college career at University of Memphis. And here he switched to an undergraduate degree in medicine because he was like, well, I'm not going to play football. I guess I should do something serious. A degree he achieved in 1995, a year before I graduated high school. He completed an MD PhD program in neurosurgery residency in 2010 at University of Tennessee Health Science Center and got a spine fellowship at a clinic in Memphis. He also made the Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society, which to qualify for that, you had to be in the top 12% of those students. Okay. So he was working hard at his schooling. Oddly, and of note, when he finished his residency, he had done less than 100 surgeries, and the norm is over 1,000 surgeries during residency. So I couldn't find how this happened. How do you skate by without doing the surgeries? Because that's the point. You'd think there'd be a minimum requirement for surgeries in a surgical residency. But anyway, it did say that in his 4th year of residency, it was discovered he was using cocaine, so he had to attend a program for impaired physicians, it's called. But then he was allowed to just finish out his residency after completing that program, and it wasn't like something that employers would be able to find, for example.
Right.
Originally, Duntsch was pursuing the PhD portion of the MD PhD program, and that might also explain why he did so few surgeries. Right. But he was more than $500,000 in debt. So he followed the money to neurosurgery, which is one of the top 3 profitable medical roles. Not the best reason to pursue a medical field, though. At that point, he had published many papers and had a patent in his name for an invention involving using stem cells to form intervertebral discs. Like, he was doing shit. However, his partners on the endeavor claimed he had ridden their coattails, basically. He would eventually be sued for not paying out on stocks and stuff like that, and was ultimately removed as a board member and the chief science officer. But by that time in 2012, he had already started working as a surgeon. And the thing about that business is, what he was good at was schmoozing people and getting the grants. Yeah. And then the people who did the scientific work was a couple. I believe they were like a Russian couple or something like that. And so they were like, he didn't do this, but he had in his name. But anyway, he's looking very impressive on paper by this point. Mm-hmm. He was top of his class. He did all of this other stuff. He earned this residency. He had written papers, and that's a big thing in the medical community, right? Is if you get these papers published and you're doing the work. He had been put in charge of like the tissue lab and stuff like that. Like, he could schmooze people and he could show people they saw how hard he worked, right? And he got rewarded for that. So, okay, we're going to backtrack from that last. In 2010, he moved to Dallas, Texas to pursue a medical career, taking his new wife, Wendy Renee Young, with him. They had met. She was a stripper, I guess, when they met. And when he was going to move, I'm not sure if they were married yet or what, because it said that when he said he got job offers from everywhere once he started sending out these applications, because, again, top of his class. And he decided on Dallas, and she went, well, my family lives there, so I'll go there with you. His family was from Denver, I think. So he butched up his resume more. He put in that he had attended St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and graduated magna cum laude. He just added this in. The degree he claimed there was microbiology, which wasn't even available at the hospital at that time, but no one checked. They saw all this shit on there. And didn't check. On top of that, Rose, after sending out applications, he got hired at the Minimally Invasive Spine Institute. Now, just for the record, he was qualified to be a minimally invasive spinal surgeon. So not deep, I'm going to open up your whole entire back. There's layers to this.
And not brain surgery.
Correct. He was not at all qualified. That's interesting because I left it out, but later on. he was trying to do a neurosurgery on somebody to fix a problem. And they were like, no. So anyway, to work for the Minimally Invasive Spine Institute, it was required that he sign on at Baylor Medical Center at Plano as a minimally invasive, say that 10 times fast, spinal surgeon. He had to basically be okayed in this hospital to be able to do surgeries there then, because maybe the center didn't have the surgeries. Because anybody who's had a surgery knows your doctor usually doesn't work at that hospital that you go to. But they go and they're qualified and approved and whatever to perform the surgery there. After his first procedure, when he took off out of state without leaving a relief doctor behind to check on the patient, did the surgery, took off. He was let go from the institute, but that was separate from Baylor, so he was kept on at Baylor. And the doctors remembered, people liked him at first, but then he was constantly bragging about being the best spinal surgeon. And they were like, he was too new to be saying that. You can't say that when you're brand new. But he just, from day one, I am the best surgeon. That's how he advertised himself. That's how he kept getting victims. And it put a wedge between him and his coworkers. His salary was $600,000 plus 40% of revenue over $800,000. So if he brought in to the hospital more than $800,000, he got almost half that money.
Yeah.
Again, that's an incentive to take on more and more surgeries than you're able to do. I think that's a very stupid way of paying your doctors.
Yes, and it's also an incentive to perform surgery that might not need to be performed.
Right. Exactly. There's so much about this that is troublesome about medicine in general, not just him.
Yes.
For that salary, he left behind a series of seriously maimed patients and a vascular surgeon named Randall Kirby, who would become part of Duntsch's downfall because he was absolutely horrified at Duntsch's performance as a surgeon. One of his first surgeries there, the other person in there had to step in and be like, you're not going to do what you're about to do. He had to physically keep him from doing the stupid thing he was trying, because the patient was bleeding out.
Oh, God.
And he just said, Duntsch just goes, well, I'm doing it by feel. I'm going to find it by feel, even though I can't see, because it was a pool of blood he was working. And he finally went to do something. I don't remember what it was. And the surgeon was like, absolutely fucking not. You need to stop. Give me a minute to stop this bleeding.
Yeah.
And then finish what you need to. And after that particular surgeon, it wasn't Kirby, but that particular surgeon refused, had several more surgeries scheduled with him, canceled them all. He was like, I will never work in an OR with him again. That's how bad it was. Of the patients Duntsch caused permanent damage to, there was Kenneth Fennell, who came out of surgery with paralysis in his legs and ongoing pain, Lee Passmore, who was left with limited mobility, incontinence, and pain when the hardware was misplaced inside him and a screw placed in a nerve bundle, and ended up losing his job with the medical examiner's office due to his lack of feeling and inability to perform field examinations. So they tried putting him on a desk, but then they were so short-staffed, he had to go. Barry Morgaloff, who had bone fragments left in his spinal canal and ended up in a wheelchair without function on the left side of his body. Jerry Summers, a friend of Duntsch's, a good friend. He had moved out to Dallas to help him set up his business because Duntsch also set up. He basically was a business. He had a business name and everything. He was living with him and he still fucked him up. So anyway.
What happened to him, or did it say?
Oh yeah, it did. So he was left a quadriplegic who ultimately died of the complications in 2021.
Oh my God.
And Kelly Martin, who bled to death after waking in such agonizing pain that she screamed and clawed at her legs until they anesthetized her. Because could you imagine, this is all spinal surgery. This is your nerves.
Yeah.
Every single thing he did caused pain. And for some of them, numbness. They never felt certain parts of their bodies again. And yeah, and of course, it doesn't go into how many of these people probably lost jobs. Some of them lost marriages over this.
Well, the one that
some of them became drug addicted for the pain relief.
The phrase "a screw in a nerve bundle."
In a nerve bundle. And here's the thing: he kept screwing the hardware into muscle and stuff instead of bone. This is an ongoing thing with him: is just putting a screw in through the hardware into wherever. Soft tissue.
Okay.
Basically. During this time, like I've kind of mentioned, other members of his surgical teams tried to stop the damage he was doing. There are other people in the OR, and they would say something, but ultimately it's his surgery. So they would try to like show him, no, that doesn't go there. You're not, that's bad. You're going to do a bad thing. This needs to go here. And of course, physically restraining him. I think there were 2 instances where another doctor like said, I'm not going to let you do this. No. He was thought to be under the influence of cocaine and liquor throughout. He refused to do follow-up with the patients he damaged, only doing a second surgery on one of the patients, where he actually did more damage, and that was only because it was Jerry Summers, who was his longtime friend, and who was living with him. The last surgery he did at Baylor was Kelly Martin, and she was the one who died. He was supposed to only be doing a minor surgery because by that point he was under review. And I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever. He was under review, so they said, please don't do anything other than minor surgeries. Like, it was left up to him to police that. They did not police him.
Oh, my God.
I feel when you're booking an OR, that somebody in charge should be looking at that and going, no, you can't do that surgery, and putting a stop to it. Oh. That's so irresponsible.
I hope I don't need any surgery ever.
Right. That's the thing is, like, that's most likely something I'm going to run into because I've had back issues and a back fracture, and ankylosing spondylitis is a real risk for me. All of it is spinal, and I'm like, I'm not getting a surgery.
No.
Especially, I'll say something later, and you'll see really why I'm not getting a spinal surgery. So anyway, they didn't enforce it, and he ends up killing that woman. Hospitals don't give a shit. They're about money. Never forget that. Never forget that. Hospitals do not exist to help people. They exist to make money. Period. They're a business. You have to hope your doctors care. Armed with that letter... Baylor revoked his surgical privileges and allowed him to quit, making him a deal. So they actually gave him a letter that he could use in the future. It said he'd had no issues as an employee with them. Basically, it's a letter of reference.
So that they didn't get sued.
It's a neutral letter of reference. Yep. Because... they were afraid of a wrongful termination suit. I'm like, sorry, at this point, are you shitting me? So, yeah, in other words, they let a man who had seriously damaged his surgical patients walk out with a letter of reference.
Nice.
Armed with that letter, Duntsch quickly got a job at Dallas Medical Center. And they actually allowed him temporary privileges to do surgery while they checked him out. They let him have privileges to do surgeries there before they had checked his background.
I get nothing.
In 1 week at Dallas Medical Center, he killed one patient and maimed another, causing the medical center to take away his privileges before they'd finished checking him out. His victims here were Floella Brown, whose vertebral artery he severed and caused her to have a stroke. Then he refused to help. She was still alive. She's there. They're calling him. He's not answering his pager because she goes downhill. And then he shows up and he's wearing the same dirty scrubs he wore a few days before, and he looks disheveled. And they say, you need to go see to Floella. And he's like, no. And they said, well, then transfer her to somebody who will. And he said, no. And instead he came in that day and he did another surgery on a woman named Mary Efford, who he basically tortured by putting screws into nerves, severing a nerve root, not removing the damaged disc he'd gone in to remove. That's what the surgery was for, was to remove a disc, and putting hardware loosely into her muscles. People could hold it through her skin and move it. That's not how this works.
Oh, God.
So Floella Brown he finally said, okay, transfer her after all of this, after doing another surgery, and then she was brain dead, and it was too late. So here we reach the second surgeon who would help bring Duntsch down. He was brought in to do salvage surgery, it's called, when you go in after another surgery to fix the shit they did. On Efford, that second woman who he tortured. I mean, that's all there is. The things he did, that's torture. Robert Henderson compared the surgical outcome as a child playing with tinker toys inside another human being. Neither Baylor nor DMC reported Duntsch to the National Practitioner Databank, which you're supposed to, but at that time the rules were so loose that they didn't have to, so they just didn't. And that left him free to get yet another job in medicine. There are lawsuits against these medical facilities. I couldn't see if that's ended yet. I didn't watch the docuseries and stuff like that. Right.
So they're probably...
well, they've been going on a long time. They're not necessarily recent, but they've been going on.
But some of them sounded like they'd happened more recently said that they may not be resolved.
They should be held responsible for it. But just so everybody knows, if they need another reason to hate Greg Abbott, and I'll mention him again, we've heard about him in the news lately in Texas. He's basically stepped in and made it harder, like basically defending the rights of the hospitals, even though he said in a statement, then he like retorts to anybody who talks about him. But that he's not either. He's just making sure that the law is followed and yada, yada, yada.
Oh, bite me.
So anyway, he took not one, but 2 new jobs. One at Southampton Community Hospital and the other at Legacy Surgery Center. I hope if anybody, some of these have changed their names, and I really thought about just listing out their new names. Because if they were this irresponsible, has that changed?
Yeah. Are they not looking at where he's been bouncing around?
Nope.
And going, oh, wait, he was at Baylor.
We
and
did
now
that at
here.
a restaurant. You know? At a restaurant. They didn't have anybody's lives in their hands.
Yeah.
It's just... Okay. So here... He maimed Jeff Cheney, damaging his spinal cord so he had no feeling on his right side. Philip Mayfield, who was paralyzed from the neck down when Duntsch drilled into his spinal cord, but who later regained the ability to walk, actually. Though he now suffers from cysts on the spinal cord, it's a condition called syringomyelia, we'll say.
Oh.
Marshall Tex Muse, who had hardware he was left in terrible chronic pain because that hardware was floating between his spine and muscle. And he ended up addicted to Percocet, lost his marriage, lost his job. Jacqueline Troy, whose trachea, vocal cords, and an artery were damaged, and whose esophagus had become attached to her trachea and like pinned under hardware, it sounded like. And Jeff Glidewell, who had a sponge left in his throat after Duntsch severed a vocal cord and artery in his esophagus. The sponge caused him to go septic. The whole reason the sponge was in there is because he was bleeding out, and Duntsch multiple times patients were bleeding out and he would not repair what was bleeding. He'd just keep doing his other shit blindly, like I mentioned on the one person. So he went septic, and he would go on to have 50 further surgeries and live a life of painful misery. At one point, Dr. Kirby, who I mentioned earlier, was brought in to remove the sponge and try to repair the damage. He felt Duntsch must have intentionally tried to kill Glidewell because nobody could be that incompetent. And at one point, one of these guys actually called the schools he'd gone to and was like, did you not see anything? Did he really have this degree? Like, they were checking because nobody else was.
Right.
The surgeons were. And of course, he did have the degrees except for the St. Jude's one. After all of these new issues, and with Duntsch applying for privileges at Methodist Hospital now, his surgical privileges were revoked. During this time, Kirby and Henderson, the 2 doctors, were continuously lobbying the Texas Medical Board to suspend Duntsch's license. Like, they were saying, this guy is a sociopath. You have to do something. He's killing and maiming people. Until June 26, 2013, they were ignored. Frighteningly, the reason for this was that neurosurgery complications are fairly typical. They were like, well, shit goes wrong in neurosurgery. Yeah! See what I'm saying? Also, with the migraine issues and all that, nobody's coming near me. So it took that long to establish what they called a pattern of patient injury. A 10-month probe was put in place with a neurosurgeon named Martin Lazar brought in to review Duntsch's work. He was appalled, obviously, at what he found, not believing a trained surgeon could do so much harm. He was like, you have to be working at doing this harm. How can you get it this wrong? How do you not learn from your mistakes? So, Lazar would be the final cog in the machinery that would bring Duntsch down. During the probe, Duntsch moved to Denver.
Of course.
I know. Declared bankruptcy, got a DUI, got arrested again, got brought in because people were concerned about his dishevelment and given a psychiatric analysis. And then he was arrested for shoplifting while visiting his kids back in Dallas. By the way, I kept all this out because it didn't seem important. He was having an affair on his wife the whole time with his assistant. They were having sex in his office. Not seeing anything effective being done to stop him, Mary Efford, Kenneth Finnell, and Lee Passmore filed federal lawsuits against Baylor in March 2014, that first medical facility. The Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott intervened by filing a motion supporting the law capping the amount of medical malpractice at $250,000 in Texas, because in Texas, nobody should ever get justice, and modified the legal definition of malice. Passmore was still fighting this battle as of a 2016 article I found. The others had settled. So other patients settled with him. And I believe others also brought charges then, other families and stuff. Attorneys had accused Abbott of getting involved to appeal to the medical lobby and keep their financial support.
Well, duh.
Things were rolling now, and in 2015, Doctors Kirby and Henderson finally got somewhere with the district attorney. They both strongly felt that he would simply get a medical license in a different state and continue ruining people's lives. I really have respect for these doctors. Because it would have been really easy for them to wash their hands of it like everybody else was. Mm-hmm. And to say, all right, we achieved it. He lost his license here in Texas. That's fine. But
He's
once
no
you cross
longer
a state,
our problem.
Yes, and they absolutely did not. They fought.
Good.
They worked hard over years to get somebody to listen to them. So after many attempts by them, the DA finally agreed that they felt they could prove he had willfully done harm. Again, this is the problem it comes to.
Right.
Accidents happen in medicine. The statute of limitations was close to being up, so they had to move quickly. Now the ADA who had taken the case, Michelle Sugar, had to convince her bosses that they had a case. All 3 doctors mentioned earlier volunteered to testify against Duntsch, so that's including Lazar. Something the DA's office said almost never happened among doctors. Again, brotherhood, right? We all know how this works.
Yes.
They don't testify against each other. These 3 were contacting the DA's office saying, please, God, put me on the stand. After obtaining a significant amount of evidence, they backed her and opted to take it to a grand jury. By this time, it was July 2015, and Duntsch was arrested. They charged him with multiple counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, aggravated assault causing serious bodily harm, and injury to an elderly person. Because it was the strongest case, prosecutors opted to pursue efforts maiming first, because there were many witnesses during and after who could attest that he ignored them when they tried to stop the damage he was doing, when they brought to his attention the damage that was happening. Luckily for everyone, he got to stay in jail for the 2 years awaiting trial.
Good.
The trial happened in 2017. Despite his attorney's arguments that he had no idea he wasn't performing quality surgeries until it all broke out and people told him that he wasn't, the trial lasted 13 days and a jury convicted him within 4 hours. He was given a life sentence on February 20th, 2017, and is not eligible for parole until 2045. His appeals have failed, and there are still civil cases against him, including by the hospitals now who are suing him, which is funny as fuck because I hope they're getting their asses sued off. As he has debts of over $1 million, I doubt they'll ever see a dime.
No.
Never before had a doctor been convicted of criminal charges based on injuries caused while at work. Because again, they take it as risks are inherent in anything medical.
And they are.
Yes. They shouldn't be this. There should be a, you know what? You maim 3 patients in a week. Let's call that bad.
Maybe you need more training. Maybe you need a thump on the head. Maybe you need to not be doing surgery.
Yeah. All in all, going unchecked for so long and due to the uselessness of the medical facilities where he worked, he injured 33 out of 38 surgical patients in 2 years. For several of them, the surgeries were meant to be quick and simple surgeries. Again, minimally invasive. Including the patient who died, Kelly Martin, who had just tweaked her back. She just tweaked her back. Had a competent surgeon helped her, she would have been in Antigua on a planned vacation not long after her surgery. Instead, they were burying her after she woke up screaming. So, yeah.
Damn.
I found him because he's not even classified as a serial killer because they can't show that he was doing it on purpose. They're just showing he was incompetent and didn't give a shit.
Yeah. Was he incompetent or was he malicious?
And unless he comes forward and says it, nobody will ever know.
It makes you want to not go to the doctor ever.
I've had multiple surgeries on my lady parts, and I think I'm not going to do any...
I think if I ever have to have a surgery or anybody close to me, I'm going to just be like, all right, I need the name of the surgeon. I need the name of the whole team.
And here's one thing. One of them, I think it was Jeff Glidewell, but possibly not. No. It was somebody earlier. He had one of the screw ups had hit the news. Mm-hmm. And it was one of his earlier patients. And the guy contacted him and said, what happened with this? And Duntsch shrieked at him and said that was an anesthesia issue. She was allergic to anesthesia, so it was about the one who had died. It must be. Right. Early on, the first one that died, Kelly Martin. And so he said, well, that made sense to me, and I still had the surgery. And then he got fucked up because he still went. But this guy, there was something else, like, There was one patient that I didn't mention here because I couldn't figure out which place she had the surgery or anything. So there were more patients than mentioned here, but if I couldn't affiliate them, I didn't. She ended up doing a testimonial, even though she had issues and it was used against her when she was trying to go in later. And she said, but he didn't tell me it was a testimonial. He was just videotaping me, and it was supposed to be, he said he was getting an award. And so he's asking his patients to just say something good about him so it could be played at the award he was getting. And she said that's haunted her ever since, because then here she is being like televised as a commercial recommending him to other people. And when he did that, she was only like a week out from surgery or something. So she didn't even know. She said she was in pain, terrible pain, of course. She had also been maimed. And she had told him that, and he said, well, that's normal a week out from surgery. So she was like, oh, okay. And she wasn't the only one who did one of those forced testimonials where they thought it was something else. So when people came to him about the pain, he would tell them they were just drug seekers. And he'd say, you can't be in that much pain still. So you're obviously a drug seeker. Like he always turned it on them. He gaslit his patients, basically, right? So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a dick.
Yeah.
What a bag of rancid dicks.
Yeah, he is indeed. Dr. Bag of Rancid Dicks.
They could put him in a cell with Jared Fogle.
Yeah.
Maybe they could operate on each other.
It's just like these people went in because they were in pain.
Right. And you.
Oh, and I think it was Efford that it was one of those women in that 2-day, that stint that happened right away. Yes, it was, he was operating on Efford, and it was the other woman who he had done first, who they were like, come back and help her. And I'm trying to remember her name. Floella Brown.
Yes.
Who they wanted him to help. And that was when he went, well, fine, bring her in. I will drill a hole through her skull to alleviate the pressure, which wasn't even the problem. He hadn't operated on her brain. That's not where she was bleeding. And they were like, A, you're not that type of neurosurgeon. And B, we don't even have the shit needed for that kind of surgery here. We don't do that kind of surgery here. So had they not said no, he would have totally drilled into this woman's head. She was already brain dead then so yeah, there were just so many little things about him.
One thing I didn't touch on that I found really disturbing. So after they decided she was a sociopath with psychopathic tendencies, she started going to therapy. Well, and this isn't Brookey, this is her mother. This is her mother who's like 60 years old.
Yeah.
Which is not that old. She developed a thing for her therapist. And she wanted to have an affair with him. And in her mind, they were having an affair.
Great.
So we all have heard of sex tapes. These were sex cassette tapes. So it was all verbal. And they had transcripts. They had transcripts of these tapes. And the things that she says, it's obvious she's talking like they are having an affair. He never touched her. He wasn't even aware of this because Brookey wouldn't let her give him the tapes.
She could have been bringing him money, apparently, as a sex phone operator.
Right? This was public record, the transcript of these tapes. And I'm like, and so she was going to kill him. Mm-hmm. Because she went to the office one day and like the receptionist made some comment like, oh yeah, he's got a new girlfriend. I think they're getting engaged or something. And she was, and Brookey would let her have a gun. So, hypocrite. Can you imagine? Here's my mixtape. Give this a listen.
Oh.
Please no.
So funny though. What year was that? It wasn't that long ago.
No, because when I was describing the Brookey case to Joe, he was like, that was what, the 1950s? And I'm like, no, it was much more recent than that. I'm like, she's your age, sweetie.
My sex mixtape for you. It's freaky. All right, but we're running super long.
Sorry.
So we need to go.
Oh.
We need to shut our fucking face holes. You got me? You read me?
I'm scared now. I hope I'll be back next week.
Right. Why not? So, So just a reminder that we are on Buy Me a Coffee. It's Buy Me a Book for us. And that's buymeacoffee.com/MM Mayhem. And that's just, it's basically $5 to throw our way, and it helps us pay for our overhead. So either way, thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you. And I hope I'll be here next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.